Rain hammered against the sleek black Lamborghini idling at the curb of a deserted downtown street. The rhythmic pounding against metal and glass made a cocoon of sound around John Caldwell as he sat motionless behind the wheel, his knuckles white against the leather steering wheel. Perfect, just perfect. He sighed and pressed his forehead against the cold window, watching the city lights blur through sheets of water. The flat tire had made itself known with a sickening lurch just as he turned onto this particular side street, oddly empty for downtown even at this late hour. John checked his watch, an elegant timepiece worth more than most people's. Monthly salary. Nearly midnight. His phone showed no service. The storm must have knocked out a cell tower. He'd have to change the tire himself. Thunder rolled overhead as John flipped open his glove compartment, searching for the manual. He'd never changed a tire on this particular model before. Most people with his kind of wealth would simply call their driver or a service, but John had always insisted on driving himself, one of the few remnants of his life before the billions. The rain soaked through his tailored suit the moment he stepped out. He popped the trunk and found the necessary tools, laying them out methodically on the wet asphalt. The jack felt foreign in his manicured hands as he knelt in a puddle, trying to position it correctly under the car's frame. A shadow stretched across the pavement. John tensed, acutely aware of how vulnerable he was. A lone billionaire on an empty street with an $800,000 car. He stood quickly, the wrench clenched in his fist. A teenager stood a few feet away. Rainwater streamed from his threadbare hoodie, soaking his already damp clothes. His shoes were worn thin, and the backpack slung over one shoulder bulged with what looked like everything he owned. Despite his apparent homelessness, the boy's gaze was steady, almost unnervingly direct. "You're doing it wrong," the boy said, nodding toward the jack. "That model needs to be placed under the reinforced point, not the frame. You'll damage it." John's eyebrows rose. "You know Lamborghinis?" A half-smile flickered across the teen's face. "I know cars." He stepped forward cautiously. "Mind if I help? I'm Marcus." For a moment, John hesitated. Every instinct honed from years of corporate battles and wealth protection warned him to be wary. But something in the boy's eyes, a quiet dignity despite his circumstances, made John step aside. "Be my guest," he said, handing over the jack. Marcus worked with practiced efficiency, his hands surprisingly clean despite his living situation. He positioned the jack correctly and began the methodical process of removing the tire. His movements were precise, almost graceful. "You've done this before," John observed, holding his umbrella over both of them. "Couple 100 times, maybe," Marcus replied without looking up. "Used to help at my uncle's garage. Before." He trailed off, focusing intently on loosening a stubborn lug nut. The silence between them was filled with the drumming of rain and the occasional distant rumble of thunder. John studied the boy's face. There was something vaguely familiar about his features, the set of his jaw, the particular shade of his eyes. "So, what's a guy in a suit like that doing changing his own tire?" Marcus asked, breaking into John's thoughts. "Figured you'd have people for that." John smiled slightly. "I do, but sometimes it's good to remember how to do things yourself." Their eyes met for a moment, a strange connection passing between them that made John inexplicably uncomfortable. He cleared his throat and looked directly at the camera. "Please leave a like and sub, and comment where you're watching from." The moment broken, Marcus lowered the car back to the ground and collected the tools, placing them neatly back in the trunk. John reached for his wallet. "How much do I owe you?" he asked, already pulling out several large bills. Marcus shook his head. "Nothing, just helping out." "I insist," John pressed. "At least let me give you something for dinner, or—" "I don't want your money," Marcus said firmly, his pride evident in the way he squared his shoulders. "Not everyone's for sale." John felt an unexpected surge of respect. He returned his wallet to his pocket and instead pulled out a business card. Sleek, minimalist, with just his name and a phone number. "If you ever need anything, A job, maybe. He held it out, not sure why he felt so compelled to help this particular person among the thousands who could use it. Marcus stared at the card for a long moment before taking it. As he did, his sleeve pushed up slightly, revealing a small birthmark on his wrist, an unusual crescent shape. John froze, his eyes fixed on the mark. A memory flickered at the edges of his consciousness, the same mark on a much smaller wrist, a baby's hand clutching his. Finger. Something wrong? Marcus asked, noticing John's stare. No, John answered quickly, looking away. Just thought I recognized something. He extended his hand. Thank you again, Marcus. They shook hands, a formal gesture that felt oddly significant. As John turned to get back in his car, he noticed something on the passenger seat that hadn't been there before. An unmarked manila envelope, slightly damp at the edges from the rain. He glanced back at Marcus, but the boy was already walking away, disappearing into the curtain of rain without looking back. John slid into the driver's seat and picked up the envelope, turning it over in his hands. No name, no address, nothing to indicate where it had come from or what it contained. His thumb hovered over the seal, instinct telling him that whatever was inside would change everything. The engine purred to life as he placed the envelope on the passenger seat, still unopened. Some revelations were better faced in the light of day. He pulled away from the curb, watching in his rearview mirror as Marcus's figure grew smaller, then vanished entirely into the storm. Morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of John's office, casting long rectangles of gold across the minimalist furniture. 52 stories above the city, the Caldwell Technologies headquarters overlooked a metropolis that John had helped reshape with his innovations. He stood at the window, coffee untouched on his desk, the unopened envelope held loosely in his fingers. His assistant's voice came through the intercom. Mr. Caldwell, the board is assembled for the quarterly meeting. They're waiting in the conference room. Tell them I'll be there shortly, John replied, not taking his eyes off the envelope. He'd spent the night thinking about the strange encounter with Marcus, about the inexplicable familiarity he'd felt. The birthmark had triggered something, a memory so distant it felt more like déjà vu than recollection. The envelope weighed almost nothing, yet it seemed to grow heavier with each passing moment. John ran his thumb under the seal and carefully opened it. Inside was a single photograph, worn around the edges, faded with age. 2 infants lay side by side in a hospital bassinet, their tiny hands intertwined. On the back, written in faded, blue ink, "You're my brother." John sank into his chair, the photograph trembling in his fingers. His chest tightened as forgotten memories surged to the surface. Fragmented images of a nursery, a woman's voice singing softly, the sound of another baby crying in the night. He had been told he was an only child, that his parents had died in an accident when he was barely a year old, leaving him to be raised by distant relatives who had treated him more like an obligation than family. There had never been any mention of a sibling, let alone a twin. Yet here was evidence to the contrary. And Marcus, with the same birthmark John himself had on his own wrist, a mark he'd always believed was unique to him. The intercom buzzed. Or again. "Mr. Caldwell, the board is getting restless." John pressed a button. "Cancel the meeting. Tell them something's come up." "But sir, the quarterly projections." "Can wait," he finished firmly. "Clear my schedule for the day." He walked to a small hidden safe behind a painting on his office wall. Inside, along with various documents and a few family heirlooms, was a small box he hadn't opened in years. His fingers trembled slightly as he lifted the lid. Inside lay the few mementos he had from his infancy. A hospital bracelet, a blue baby cap, and a small blanket with his initials embroidered in the corner. He'd never examined them closely before. They had been painful reminders of what he'd lost. Now he studied each item with new intensity. The hospital bracelet bore his name, John Alexander Caldwell, and a date of birth. But there was something else printed on it he'd never noticed before. Twin A. His phone rang, breaking the silence. The display showed his lawyer's number. "Richard," he answered, his voice hollow. "I need you to find something for me. Birth records from Memorial Hospital, June 15th, 1993. I need to know if there was a twin birth registered to Catherine and James Caldwell." "John, what's this about?" Richard asked, concern evident in his voice. "Just find it, as quickly as possible." He hung up before his lawyer could ask more questions. John returned to the photograph, studying the two identical infants. If one was him, then the other. Could it possibly be Marcus? The timing was right. Marcus appeared to be the same age as John, perhaps 25 or 26. And the birthmark? He turned the photo over again, examining the handwriting. "You're my brother." Not a question, but a statement, as if the writer knew with certainty. Had Marcus written this? Or was there someone else involved? John's gaze fell on the business card he'd placed. On his desk, his own card, which he'd given to Marcus the night before. He picked up his phone again and dialed his head of security. "Frank, I need you to track someone down for me. A homeless young man. Goes by the name Marcus. Probably stays somewhere downtown near 7th and Westmore where I had the flat tire last night." "You want me to bring him in, sir?" Frank asked. "No," John replied quickly. "Just find him. Watch him. Let me know where he stays, where he goes, but don't approach him. I'll do that myself." John hung up and returned to the window, looking down. At the city below. Somewhere out there was Marcus. Possibly his brother, a twin he never knew existed. The thought was simultaneously exhilarating and terrifying. His phone buzzed with a text from Richard. "Birth certificate found. Catherine and James Caldwell, twin boys born June 15th, 1993. Twin B named Marcus James Caldwell." John's heart thundered in his chest. He had a brother, a twin brother, and somehow, against impossible odds, they had found each other. Or had they? John hesitated, his natural skepticism rising to the surface. This could all be an elaborate scam. Marcus could have researched him, found information about his birth, created this story to exploit him. God knew it wouldn't be the first time someone had tried to take advantage of his wealth. But the birthmark, that wasn't something that could be fabricated. And the genuine surprise in Marcus's eyes when John had handed him the business card, that hadn't seemed like the reaction of someone executing a con. John slipped the photograph into his pocket and grabbed his keys. Board meetings and quarterly projections could wait. For the first time in his life, something mattered more than Caldwell Technologies. The streets looked different in daylight, cleaner, more impersonal. John drove slowly through the downtown district where he'd met Marcus, eyes scanning every alleyway and storefront. He'd traded his usual Lamborghini for a more inconspicuous sedan from his collection, and dressed down in jeans and a simple jacket that wouldn't draw attention. 3 hours of searching had yielded nothing. The shopkeepers he'd questioned either hadn't seen Marcus or were unwilling to talk about the local homeless population. John was beginning to understand how invisible people like Marcus became in a city that preferred not to acknowledge them. He parked near a small diner and went. Inside, ordering coffee, he didn't want just to have an excuse to sit and observe the street. The waitress placed the mug in front of him with a tired smile. "You looking for someone?" she asked, noticing his attention to the windows. John hesitated, then pulled out his phone. He'd used the photo editor on his tablet to isolate and enhance the image of one of the babies from the old photograph, then aged it computationally to match what a young man in his mid-20s might look like. It wasn't perfect, but it was recognizable as Marcus. "Have you seen this person? His name is Marcus." The waitress studied the image and her expression softened. "The quiet one. Yeah, he comes in sometimes when Hal's working. Washes dishes for a meal." She glanced at John's expensive watch, which he'd forgotten to remove. "You don't look like his usual company. You a social worker or something?" "Family," John said simply. surprising himself with how naturally the word came to his lips. Something in his tone must have convinced her. He usually camps near the old subway entrance on 9th, the one they closed down last year for renovations but never got around to finishing. She hesitated. He's a good kid. Whatever you want with him, he doesn't need more trouble. John left a $100 bill for a $3 coffee and headed toward 9th Street. The abandoned subway entrance was cordoned off with faded yellow, tape, and temporary barriers that had become semi-permanent. A sign promised renovations would be completed by fall 2023, a deadline long past. As John approached, he spotted a familiar figure slipping through a gap in the barriers, a ragged duffel bag slung over one shoulder. Marcus looked even more worn in daylight, his clothes hanging loose on his frame, suggesting recent weight loss. John quickened his pace, but stopped short of calling out. What would he even say? "I think you're my long-lost twin brother?" He needed to approach this carefully. He followed Marcus to the subway entrance, watching as the young man slipped through the chained doors with practiced ease. John waited several moments, then approached the same entrance. The chains were arranged to appear secure from a distance, but had actually been modified to allow passage if you knew how. The stairwell descended into darkness. John used his phone's flashlight to illuminate the way, grimacing at the graffiti and debris that lined the stairs. The air grew cooler as he descended, carrying the distinct musty smell of abandoned urban spaces. At the bottom, the beam of his light swept across an empty platform. There was evidence of habitation. A small cooking station made from discarded bricks, a few plastic crates serving as furniture, some tattered blankets spread over, a cardboard mattress. But no Marcus. John ventured further onto the platform, his light revealing the tracks below and the dark tunnel beyond. A sound echoed from somewhere deeper in the station. A voice, then another. Multiple people. He moved toward the sound, following the platform to where it curved around a corner. His light caught the reflective strip on Marcus's hoodie, and then the scene came into full view. Marcus stood with his back against a tiled wall surrounded by 3 older men. Their postures were unmistakably threatening, one of them holding a knife that caught the beam of John's flashlight. "Just give us the bag, kid, and we'll leave you alone," one of them was saying, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "There's nothing in it worth taking," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the fear evident in his rigid posture. "Let us decide that," said the one with the knife, reaching for the duffel. Marcus shoved him back with surprising strength. "No." The movement provoked the man, who lunged forward with the knife. Marcus dodged, but his back hit the wall, leaving him nowhere to retreat. A scream echoed through the tunnel, not from Marcus or his attackers, but from somewhere deeper in the darkness. Everyone froze. "What was that?" one of the men whispered. The scream came again, followed by a strange scratching sound. The men exchanged nervous glances. "This ain't worth it," muttered the one farthest from Marcus. "Place is haunted anyway." The man with the knife seemed reluctant to leave, but another scream, closer this time, made his decision for him. "Let's go. Kid's got nothing worth dying for." They backed away, then turned and hurried toward the stairs, shoving past John, who pressed himself against the wall to avoid confrontation. When they were gone, Marcus sagged against the wall, clutching the duffel bag to his chest. His eyes found John in the shadows, and he straightened immediately. "You followed me," he accused, voice brittle with anger and residual fear. From deeper in the tunnel came a soft laugh. Then the beam of another flashlight approached. A young woman emerged from the darkness, her face streaked with dirt, but grinning. "Widely. Told you I could do scary ghost noises," she said to Marcus, then noticed John. Her smile vanished. "Who's he?" Marcus's gaze never left John. "The guy with the flat tire. The one I told you about." His eyes narrowed. "Why are you here? What do you want?" John stepped forward slowly, hands slightly raised to show he meant no threat. I think. You know why I'm here, Marcus? The photograph felt heavy in his pocket. He pulled it out and held it where Marcus could see it. You put this in my car last night, didn't you? Marcus's expression gave nothing away, but the young woman beside him glanced anxiously between them. Mark, who is this guy? Marcus ignored her question, his focus entirely on John. Why would I do that? Because of this, John said. He pushed up his sleeve to reveal his own crescent-shaped birthmark, identical to the one he'd spotted on Marcus's wrist the night before. Marcus's composure faltered. He took an involuntary step backward, bumping into the woman beside him. I don't know what you're talking about, he said, but his voice had lost its conviction. I think you do, John pressed. Twin A and Twin B, born June 15, 1993, to Catherine and James Caldwell. At the mention of those names, Marcus's face drained of color. The duffel bag slipped from his fingers and hit the ground with a soft thud. How do you know those names? He whispered. Before John could answer, the sound of footsteps echoed from the stairwell. Heavy, purposeful steps of multiple people descending rapidly. Marcus grabbed his bag and the woman's hand. We need to go. Now. John stepped forward. Wait, we need to talk about this. Not here. Marcus cut him off, already backing away toward the tunnel. They'll have followed you. Your fancy car, your clothes, you stick out in this neighborhood. Who followed me? John asked, glancing back toward the stairs. Doesn't matter, Marcus replied, but if you want answers, you'd better come with us. The footsteps grew louder. John made his decision and followed Marcus and the woman as they disappeared into the darkness of the subway tunnel, leaving behind the approaching threat and stepping into an uncertain future filled with questions about a shared past. The subway tunnel stretched before them like a throat, swallowing what little light remained from the platform. John's phone flashlight cut a narrow beam through the darkness as he followed Marcus and the young woman deeper into the abandoned system. Who was that coming? Down the stairs? John asked, his voice bouncing oddly off the curved walls. Security, probably, Marcus replied without slowing. Rich guy like you wandering around an abandoned station. Somebody noticed. The woman glanced back at John, her expression a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. I'm Ellie, by the way, since no one's bothering with introductions. John nodded in acknowledgement. John Caldwell. Ellie's eyes widened slightly at the name, but she said nothing more. They walked in silence for several minutes, the only sounds their footsteps echoing and the occasional drip of water from the ceiling. The tunnel gradually widened into another platform, smaller than the main station, appearing to be an auxiliary stop that had been closed even before the rest of the system. Unlike the first platform, this one showed signs of careful maintenance. Several battery-powered lanterns created islands of warm light. A curtained-off area in one corner suggested a makeshift bedroom. Plastic crates had been arranged into a crude table and chairs. A small shelf held books and a few personal items. You live here, John said, taking it in. Marcus set down his duffel bag and switched on another lantern. Not everyone has a penthouse. The accusation in his tone was unmistakable. John felt a strange twist of guilt, not just for his wealth, but for the years of comfort he'd experienced while Marcus apparently struggled. How long? He asked. Marcus shrugged. This spot? About 8 months. Before that, different places. You get used to moving. You shouldn't have to, John said quietly. Ellie watched their exchange with growing confusion. Okay, what's going on? Between you two? Mark, who is this guy, really? Marcus and John locked eyes across the makeshift living room, a silent conversation passing between them. After a moment, Marcus nodded slightly. A permission granted. I think, John said carefully, that Marcus and I are brothers. Twin brothers, separated as infants. Ellie's mouth fell open. She looked to Marcus for confirmation, but he had turned away, busying himself with lighting another lantern. That's impossible, she finally said. Mark grew up in the foster system. His parents died when he was a baby. Half right, Marcus muttered. He turned back to face them, his expression guarded. My mother died in childbirth. My father, well, I was told he couldn't handle the grief, took off, left 2 babies behind. John frowned. That's not what I was told. I grew up thinking I was an only child, that both parents died in an accident when I was barely a year old. Somebody's lying, Ellie observed. Or everybody is, Marcus added. Before they could discuss further, a distant sound echoed through the tunnel. Voices moving closer. Marcus quickly doused all but 1 lantern. Yegurkneem. The security didn't give up. He grabbed his duffel bag again. There's another way out, through the maintenance tunnels. Wait, John said, pulling out his phone. Let me handle this. Marcus stared at him incredulously. With what? Your stock. Portfolio. John ignored the jab and dialed a number. Frank, it's me. I'm in the abandoned subway station on 9th. There are security guards coming through the main tunnel. Call them off. There was a pause as he listened to the response. No, I wasn't kidnapped. I'm fine. Just call them off. Another pause. Yes, right now. He hung up and looked at Marcus. They'll leave, but we should still get out of here. My security team thinks I've been kidnapped and they've alerted my board. Marcus seemed unimpressed by this show of influence. And why should I go anywhere with you? John reached into his pocket and pulled out the photograph again. Because you put this in my car for a reason. Because we both deserve answers. He hesitated, then added softly. Because we've already lost 25 years. Something in Marcus's expression shifted. A crack in the hardened exterior he presented to the world. He looked down at the duffel bag he clutched so protectively. There's more, isn't there? John asked. More than just the photo. After a long moment, Marcus nodded. Yeah, there's more. Ellie touched Marcus's arm gently. Go with him, Mark. Find out the truth. She smiled sadly. You've been searching your whole life. The distant voices had stopped. John's call, apparently, successful in calling off the security team. But the silence felt temporary, a brief reprieve rather than a resolution. We can go to my place, John offered. It's secure. No one will bother us there. Marcus hesitated, then shook his head. Too obvious. If someone's been keeping this secret for 25 years, they've got resources. Your place will be the first place they'll look. Then where? I know a spot, Marcus said. But first, we need to get Ellie somewhere safe. John nodded, understanding. The implication. Whatever they were about to uncover came with risk. Risk that shouldn't extend to others. As they prepared to leave, a private security detail suddenly appeared at the entrance to the platform. Not the regular guards from before, but men in dark suits with earpieces, clearly professional. Mr. Caldwell, one of them called, hand moving inside his jacket. Your board sent us to ensure your safety. John tensed, sensing danger rather than protection. The timing was too convenient. The men too polished to be simple security guards concerned for a wayward CEO. I'm fine, he replied, stepping slightly in front of Marcus and Ellie. As I told Frank, I'm handling personal business. The board is concerned, sir. There have been developments that require your immediate attention. We're instructed to bring you back, Marcus whispered to John. They're not here to help you. John had already reached the same conclusion. His rescue felt more like an attempted capture. Tell. The board, I'll contact them in the morning, John said firmly. Now please leave. The lead security man exchanged glances with his colleagues. I'm afraid we can't do that, sir. In one smooth motion, he withdrew his weapon. Not a standard security sidearm, but a pistol with a silencer attached. John reacted instantly, shoving Marcus and Ellie toward the maintenance tunnel entrance while lunging for the nearest lantern. He threw it at the security team, the glass shattering and spilling burning oil across the platform floor. The flames spread quickly, creating a momentary barrier. "Go!" John shouted as the security men scrambled to avoid the fire. They raced into the maintenance tunnel, the darkness swallowing them as gunshots echoed behind them, muffled by the silencers but still clearly recognizable. "Who are those guys?" Ellie gasped as they ran. "Someone who doesn't want us to find out the truth," John replied grimly. Rain pounded the streets above as they emerged from an emergency exit 3 blocks from the abandoned station. They'd navigated the maze of maintenance tunnels, guided by Marcus's knowledge of the underground system he'd made his home. "We need to split up," Marcus said urgently, pulling Ellie aside. "Those men were after John and me, not you. Get to Kim's place. Stay there until I contact you." Ellie nodded, her face pale but determined. "Be careful, Mark." She glanced at John. "Both of you." They watched her hurry away, disappearing around a corner into the rainy night. Marcus turned to John, his expression grave. "Those weren't regular security guards." "No," John agreed. "Someone on my board must be involved. They knew exactly where to find us." "We need to get off the streets," Marcus said, scanning the area. "And we need transportation." John's expensive car would be too recognizable, and rideshare services would leave a digital trail. Marcus led them to a smaller side street where several motorcycles were parked outside a bar. "You know how to ride?" Marcus asked, approaching an older model with less electronic security. John raised an eyebrow. "Are we stealing it?" "Borrowing," Marcus corrected, already working on the ignition. "I'll return it tomorrow." His skilled hands made quick work of the security measures. The bike roared to life, drawing curious glances from a few smokers outside. "The bar? Where are we going?" John asked as he climbed on behind Marcus. "Somewhere no one would think to look for a billionaire," Marcus replied, pulling into traffic. "My research room." They rode through back streets and industrial areas, eventually arriving at what appeared to be an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Marcus unlocked a side door and ushered John inside. The cavernous space was mostly empty except for rusting machinery and debris. In the far corner, however, was a small office area that Marcus had converted into a living space, complete with a desk, mattress, and a wall covered in papers, photographs, and connecting strings. "My investigation center," Marcus explained, switching on a battery-powered lamp. "I come here when I need to think without worrying about being robbed or kicked out." John approached the wall, studying the assembled information. Newspaper clippings about Catherine Caldwell's supposed death in childbirth, copies of birth certificates, hospital records, foster care documentation, all connected in a web of red string. "How long have you been investigating this?" John asked, overwhelmed by the extent of Marcus's search. 7 years, Marcus replied, setting down his duffel bag on the desk. "Ever since my 18th birthday, when I finally got access to my own records." He unzipped the bag and carefully removed a worn wooden box. "That's when I found this." From the box, he withdrew a tattered piece of baby clothing, a small, blue sock, yellowed with age. "It was with my personal effects, the only thing I had from before entering the system." John's heart began to race. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small cloth bag he'd brought from his safe. From it, he withdrew an identical sock, equally aged. "A pair," he whispered, holding his sock next to Marcus's. "Just like us." Marcus swallowed hard, seeing the matching sock. For the first time, his composure truly faltered, his eyes filling with sudden tears that he quickly blinked away. "I found your name in my birth records," he said quietly. "It took me years to track you down, to be sure it was really you, the billionaire tech genius with my face, my birthmark." He laughed without humor. "Do you know how crazy that sounds? To tell people your long-lost twin is one of the richest men in the country? Is that why you didn't approach me directly? Why the photograph in my car?" Marcus nodded. "I needed to see how you'd react, if you'd even care enough to look for me." "Of course I care," John said, surprised by the question. "You're my brother." "Am I?" Marcus challenged. "Or am I just a complication? A PR problem for Caldwell Technologies? The family shame they tried to hide?" John shook his head, rejecting the suggestion. "I didn't even know you existed until yesterday. Whatever happened, whoever separated us, I had no part in it." Marcus studied him, searching for deception. Finding none, he reached back into the wooden box and removed another photograph, this one showing a young woman holding twin babies. "Our mother," he said. "Catherine Caldwell, dead at 28, complications from childbirth. At least that's the official story." John took the photograph, studying the woman's face. Gentle eyes, a subtle smile. He'd seen so few pictures of his mother. The relatives who raised him had removed all family photos, as if trying to erase the past entirely. "You don't believe she died in childbirth?" he asked. Marcus's expression darkened. "I have reason to think she might have been alive for months. Afterward, maybe years." He hesitated. "And I don't think her death, whenever it happened, was an accident." He pulled a torn scrap of paper from the box, a fragment of a hospital form with a partial date stamp years after their birth. "Catherine." Caldwell's name was clearly visible. "I found this in county archives," Marcus explained. "Medical record, dated 5 years after we were born. Someone tried to destroy it. I found it in a bin of documents scheduled for shredding." John studied the fragment, his mind reeling. If she was alive, why would she leave us? Why wouldn't she try to find us? "Maybe she did," Marcus replied. "Maybe she was prevented from finding us. Or maybe—" He trailed off. "What?" "Maybe she's still trying." John looked up sharply. "You think she's alive?" "Now?" Marcus opened the duffel bag again and withdrew a small, worn envelope. "This arrived at the shelter where I was staying, about a month ago. No return address, no note." Inside was a current newspaper clipping about John's upcoming charity gala, and a faded photograph of the same woman from before, but older, perhaps in her 40s. The photograph had been taken secretly, from a distance, as if the photographer didn't want to be noticed. "Someone wants us to find each other," Marcus said, "and I think that someone might be our mother." As if on cue, John's phone vibrated with a text message. When he checked the screen, his blood ran cold. The message came from an unknown number. "They're coming for you both. Get to Cedar Creek. Find the woman at the blue house on Lakeside Drive. She has answers about Catherine. Hurry." John showed the message to Marcus, whose eyes widened. "Cedar Creek is an hour north of here," he said urgently. "We need to go, now." As if emphasizing the urgency, the warehouse's metal door rattled violently. Someone trying to force entry. "Back exit," Marcus whispered, grabbing his duffel bag. They slipped through a rear door just as the main entrance gave way. The sound of heavy footsteps filling the warehouse. Outside, rain was still falling in sheets. They ran to the motorcycle, now their only means of escape. "Cedar Creek," John repeated as they sped away, the warehouse receding behind them. "Who do you think sent that message?" "Someone who knows we're together," Marcus replied over his shoulder. "Someone who's been watching both of us." They rode through the stormy night, the city lights fading behind them as they headed north toward Cedar Creek, and possibly toward their mother. The small town of Cedar Creek appeared as a cluster of lights through the rain-swept darkness. Marcus slowed the motorcycle as they approached, both men soaked to the skin and chilled to the bone from the hour-long ride through the storm. "Lakeside Drive," John said, reading from his phone. "Should be on the east side of town, near the water." They followed the main street through the sleeping town, passing darkened storefronts and quiet homes. It was nearly midnight, and the only signs of life came from a single bar on the corner and a gas station at the edge of town. "There," Marcus pointed to a street sign barely visible in the rain. "Lakeside Drive." They turned onto a narrow road that wound along the shore of a small lake, lined with modest houses set back among the trees. Most were dark at this late hour, but about halfway down the road they spotted it, a small blue house with a light burning in the front window. Marcus parked the motorcycle a short distance away. They approached the house cautiously, acutely aware that this could be a trap as easily as salvation. The house was well maintained but simple, with a small porch and a garden that suggested careful tending. A wind chime tinkled softly in the rain, the only sound beyond the steady patter of droplets on leaves. "Should we knock?" John whispered, suddenly uncertain now that they'd arrived. Marcus stared at the lighted window, his expression a mixture of hope and fear. "We've come this far." Before either could move, the front door opened. A woman stood silhouetted in the doorway, her features indistinguishable in the backlight. "I've been waiting for you," she said, her voice soft but steady. "Come inside, quickly." John and Marcus exchanged glances, then approached the porch steps. As they drew closer, the woman stepped forward into the rain, allowing them to see her face clearly for the first time. She was in her early 50s, her dark hair streaked with silver, her face lined with age but still beautiful. John felt a jolt of recognition, not from memory but from the photographs they'd seen. This was Catherine Caldwell, their mother. Older, changed by time, but unmistakably her. "Mom," Marcus whispered, the word catching in his throat. The woman's eyes filled with tears. "No," she said gently, "I'm not your mother. I'm her sister, your aunt, Charlotte Wright." The revelation hung in the rain-soaked air between them. John felt a plunging disappointment, even as his mind raced to process this new information. "Please," Charlotte said, gesturing inside. "It's not safe out here. They'll have tracked the text I sent you." They followed her into a warm, simply furnished living room. A fire burned in a small hearth, and the walls were lined with bookshelves. Charlotte motioned for them to sit, then disappeared briefly into another room, returning with towels and 2 mugs of hot tea. "I don't have much time to explain," she said, handing them the towels. "They'll realize I've contacted you soon, if they haven't already." "Who's they?" John demanded, accepting the tea but not drinking it. "And where is our mother? Is she alive?" Charlotte's expression clouded with sorrow. "Catherine died 12 years ago. I'm so sorry. She spent years trying to find you both. But every lead was a dead end. Every search blocked by the people who separated you." Marcus set down his mug, his hands trembling slightly. "Who separated us? And why?" "Your grandfather, Emmett Wright." "My father." Charlotte's voice hardened with old anger. "He never approved of your father, James. When Catherine married him anyway, Emmett vowed to make them regret it." "But why separate? Us from our parents?" John asked. "Why create this elaborate fiction about their deaths?" "Money," Charlotte replied simply. "And control. When Catherine became pregnant, Emmett created a trust for his grandchild, $100 million to be released on their 30th birthday. But when twins were born instead, he changed the terms," Marcus finished, remembering the documents he'd found. "The trust could only be claimed if both beneficiaries appeared together." Charlotte nodded. "But Emmett never intended for that to happen. He arranged for you to be separated at birth. John was given to distant cousins of our mother, the Hendersons, who were paid handsomely to raise him as their own and never reveal the truth. Marcus was supposed to be adopted by a family in another state, but somehow ended up in the foster system instead. And our parents," John pressed. "What happened to them?" Charlotte's eyes filled with tears again. "Your father died 6 months after your birth, a supposed accident at the garage where he worked. Catherine was told that Marcus had died in birth, a lie supported by falsified hospital records. She was sedated during the delivery, never even got to hold either of you." "But she must have known she had twins," Marcus objected. "She did, but grief and drugs are powerful tools. The doctors, paid by Emmett, convinced her that her memories were confused, that there had only ever been one baby. Charlotte shook her head. By the time she realized the truth, years had passed. John was firmly established with the Hendersons, who threatened legal action if she tried to contact him, and Marcus was lost in the system, his records falsified. So, she just gave up. John couldn't keep the accusation from his voice. "Never," Charlotte said firmly. "She spent every penny. She had trying to find you both. She hired investigators, bribed officials, tracked down hospital staff, but Emmett's influence was too great. Every time she got close, the trail would suddenly go cold. Witnesses would recant or disappear. Walked to a bookshelf and removed an old photo album, bringing it back to them. This is her journal of the search. Years of notes, leads, dead ends." She opened it, revealing pages of meticulous handwriting and pinned photographs. She never stopped looking, even after she became ill. "What happened to her?" Marcus asked quietly. "Cancer. The treatments drained what little money she had left. I took care of her in the end, here in this house." Charlotte turned to a final page in the album, where a photograph showed Catherine in a hospital bed, thin and pale but smiling. "Her last wish was for me to continue searching, to bring her boys home." John felt tears burning his eyes. Those years growing up with the cold, distant Hendersons, believing himself alone in the world, while his mother had been alive, searching for him. "And our grandfather?" he asked, his voice tight. "Emmett Wright." "Still alive," Charlotte replied bitterly. 92 years old and still pulling strings. The trust date is approaching, your 30th birthday. He's desperate to insure you. Never find each other, never claim what's rightfully yours. "We don't care about the money," Marcus said. "We just wanted to know the truth." Charlotte smiled sadly. It was never about the money for Catherine either. It was about her children, her family. A sudden noise outside made them all freeze. The crunch of tires on gravel, headlights sweeping across the curtained windows. "They're here," Charlotte said, her voice suddenly urgent. "The back door. Take the path through the woods to the boathouse. There's a car in the garage there. Keys are in the ignition." "Come with us," John urged, but Charlotte was already shaking her head. "I need to slow them down. Give you time." She pressed the photo album into Marcus's hands. "Take this. Everything Catherine discovered is in here, including names of people who helped Emmett. Evidence of what they did." "We can't just leave you," Marcus protested. "You must," Charlotte insisted. "Find the others. Catherine wasn't the only mother separated from her children. Emmett has done this before, used his wealth and influence to tear apart families he disapproved of. You can stop him, but only if you survive tonight." The sound of car doors slamming outside spurred them into motion. Charlotte led them to the rear of the house, opening a door that led to a small back garden. "The path is just beyond those trees," she said, pointing to a wooded area at the edge of the property. "Stay together. Whatever happens, stay together." John impulsively embraced her. "Thank you," he whispered, "for helping our mother, for helping us." Charlotte returned the embrace briefly, then pushed him toward the door. "Go. Now." She pressed something into Marcus's hand as he passed, a small key on a faded ribbon. "Catherine wanted you to have this. It opens a safe deposit box at first. National in the city, box 1576, more evidence, names of others who can help you." Marcus nodded, clutching the key tightly. Then he and John slipped out into the rain-soaked night, racing across the garden toward the tree line. Behind them, they heard the crash of the front door being forced open, followed by Charlotte's voice, raised in angry protest. They plunged into the woods just as flashlight beams began sweeping the garden. "The path," John whispered, spotting a narrow trail leading deeper into the trees. They followed it, moving as quickly as they dared in the darkness and rain, branches whipping at their faces. The sound of pursuit grew louder, men crashing through the underbrush, shouts echoing through the trees. A gunshot cracked the night, followed by another. Marcus stumbled suddenly, clutching his side. "I'm hit," he gasped. John caught him before he could fall, supporting his weight. "Hold on," he urged. "The boathouse is just ahead." Through the trees, they could see the dark shape of a small structure at the water's edge. With renewed determination, John half-carried Marcus toward it, each step an agony of fear and desperation. They reached the boathouse and fumbled with the door in the darkness. Inside, as promised, was a garage containing an old but well-maintained car. John helped Marcus into the passenger seat, then slid behind the wheel. The keys were in the ignition. The engine roared to life just as flashlights appeared at the edge of the clearing. John threw the car into reverse, backing out of the boathouse as bullets pinged against the metal siding. "Hang on," he shouted to Marcus, who was pressing a hand against his bleeding side. The car fishtailed on the muddy ground, then gained traction as John pointed it toward a service road that ran alongside the lake. In the rearview mirror, he could see men running toward vehicles parked at Charlotte's house. The pursuit wasn't over. "The album," Marcus said through gritted teeth. "Did we get it?" John reached down with one hand, feeling the leather-bound book that had fallen to the floor during their escape. "We got it," he confirmed. "Now let's get you to a hospital." Marcus shook his head weakly. "No hospitals. They'll find us there." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the key Charlotte had given him. "We need to get to that safe deposit box. Need to find out who else can help us." John gripped the steering wheel tighter, torn between his brother's immediate medical needs and the larger truth they were pursuing. In the end, there was only one choice that honored what their mother had fought for all those years. "First aid kit in my office," he decided, increasing their speed on the rain-slicked road. "We'll patch you up, then head to the bank at opening." "Together," Marcus nodded, his face pale but determined. "Together," he echoed. "Family found us at you." Last. Behind them, headlights appeared on the road, the pursuit continuing, relentless. But ahead lay the highway, the city, and answers to questions that had shaped their entire lives. In the rain-swept darkness, two brothers, separated by circumstance but united by blood, raced toward a dawn that promised either revelation or ruin, the truth of their past finally within reach after 25 years of lies. Dawn broke over the city skyline as John pulled the car into the alley behind his office building. Marcus had drifted in and out of consciousness during the drive, the makeshift bandage John had fashioned from his shirt now soaked through with blood. "Stay with me," John urged, killing the engine. "We're here." Marcus stirred, his face pale and drawn. "Where is here, exactly?" "Back entrance to my building. Private elevator, no cameras." John leaned across to help Marcus sit up. "Can you walk?" "Do I have a choice?" Marcus grimaced as he shifted, pain flaring across his features. They made their way slowly through the service entrance, John supporting most of his brother's weight. The building was nearly empty at this early hour. A single security guard dozed at the main desk, far from their side entrance. John's private office suite took up half of the top floor. He guided Marcus to a leather couch, then retrieved the emergency medical kit he kept in his bathroom. "This needs stitches," John said, examining the bullet wound in Marcus's side. "It's through and through. Missed anything vital, but you've lost a lot of blood." "Just patch it up," Marcus replied weakly. "We need to get to that safe deposit box." John worked quickly, cleaning and dressing the wound with supplies from his unexpectedly comprehensive medical kit. "Boy Scout?" Marcus asked, watching John's practiced movements. "Board member got shot during a hunting trip last year," John explained. "Made me paranoid enough to learn emergency first aid." When he finished, Marcus looked marginally better. Still weak, but the bleeding had stopped, and some color had returned to his face. "The bank opens at 9, John said, checking his watch. 3 hours from now. You should rest until then." Marcus shook his head stubbornly. "We need to use this time. The journal." John retrieved Charlotte's album from the bag. They spread it open on the coffee table, careful of Marcus's injury. Page after page revealed their mother's desperate search. Notes, maps, photographs, copies of records. Names circled in red, theories connected with string, dead ends marked. With X's, an investigation spanning years, driven by a mother's determination to find her stolen children. "Look at this," Marcus said, pointing to a page near the end. "It's a list of names. Others, like us." The page contained a dozen names with birth dates and brief notations. Twins separated, sent to different states, records altered. Emmett didn't just do this to us, John realized. He's been doing it for years. To other families. Controlling inheritances, manipulating bloodlines, Marcus agreed grimly, playing God with people's lives. Another page held newspaper clippings about Emmett Wright's philanthropic work, hospital wings named after him, donations to children's charities. A cruel irony given his actions. "We need to expose him," Marcus said, his voice strengthening, with resolve. "For our mother. For all of them." John nodded, a plan forming in his mind. "The gala tomorrow night. Every major player in the city will be there, including the press. And Emmett? He rarely misses it. It's his chance to be seen as the benevolent patriarch." John's expression hardened. This year will be different. As they continued through the journal, a folded paper fell from between the pages, an aged crayon drawing of 4 stick figures holding hands. "My family" was written in a child's unsteady hand across the top. "I drew this," John whispered, recognition dawning. "I remember now. I was maybe 4 years old." Marcus looked at the drawing. Mother, father, and 2 identical children. She kept it all this time. The simple drawing broke something in John, a dam of emotions he'd held in check for decades. Tears slid down his face as he held the paper, memories filtering back. His mother's voice singing him to sleep, his father's strong hands lifting him high, and a faint, ghost-like memory of another child just like him, reaching for the same toy. "I think I remember you," he admitted. Not clearly, but a feeling, like having a shadow that was alive. Marcus nodded, his own eyes glistening. "I used to dream about someone with my face. Thought I was just messed up from being in the system." The brothers sat in silence for a moment, the weight of what had been stolen from them settling on their shoulders. Not just time and family, but memories, identity, the very foundation of who they were. John's phone rang, breaking the moment. The display showed his assistant's name. "Sir," she said when he answered, her voice strained. "The board has called an emergency meeting. They're voting to remove you as CEO. Richard Cohen is leading the charge." "On what grounds?" John asked, though he already knew. Mental instability, erratic behavior, abandonment of duties. She hesitated. "Sir, there are also rumors about a family situation. They're saying you've been compromised." "What time is the meeting?" 9 a.m. They're gathering now for pre-meeting discussions. John thanked her and hung up, turning to Marcus. "Change of plans. We need to handle this first." He explained the situation as he moved to his closet, retrieving fresh clothes for both of them. "They're trying to lock you out before we can get to the safe deposit box," Marcus observed, wincing as he changed into the shirt John offered. "Exactly. We need to confront them head-on." John helped Marcus stand. "Are you up for it?" Marcus straightened, determination overcoming pain. "Try and stop me." The Caldwell Technologies boardroom fell silent as the doors swung open. 20 pairs of eyes turned to stare as John walked in, Marcus at his side. Richard Cohen, John's longtime lawyer, was the first to recover from the shock. "John, this is a private board meeting. Your guest will need to leave." "My brother stays," John replied calmly, moving to the head of the table. In fact, his presence is essential to what I have to say. Murmurs rippled through the room. Several board members exchanged nervous glances. I understand you're planning to vote me out, John continued, his voice carrying effortlessly through the space. Something about mental instability and family. Complications. John, this isn't personal, Richard began, his practiced lawyer's voice smooth with false concern. We're worried about your well-being and the company's stability. Is that why you sent armed men after us last night, Richard? John asked, his tone conversational despite the accusation. Because you were concerned for my well-being. Richard's face paled slightly. I don't know what you're talking about. Marcus stepped forward, placing their mother's journal on the table. I think you do. Just like you know about this, and the trust, and everything else that's been hidden for 25 years. One of the older board members leaned forward, peering at Marcus with growing recognition. My God, it's true then. The resemblance is unmistakable. Allow me to introduce myself, Marcus said, addressing the room. Marcus Caldwell, John's twin brother, the one you were never supposed to know about. John took over, his voice steady, as he laid out the truth, the separation at birth, the lies about their parents' deaths, the trust set to mature on their 30th birthday, and their grandfather's decades-long manipulation. Some of you may have suspected parts of this, he said, looking around the table. Others may have actively participated in the deception. Either way, it ends today. Richard stood abruptly. This is preposterous. This person shows up claiming to be your long-lost brother, and you're ready to throw away everything you've built? The board won't stand for it. That's for the board to decide, John replied. After they have all the facts. He nodded to Marcus, who opened their mother's journal to a marked page. Catherine Caldwell kept meticulous records, Marcus said, including evidence of bribes paid to hospital administrators, falsified death, certificates, and this, a list of board members who've been receiving payments from Emmett Wright for years. He slid the journal toward the center of the table. Several names were highlighted, including Richard's. This is absurd. Richard sputtered, but his face had gone ashen. You can't possibly believe— Save it, Richard, John cut him off. We've already accessed the safe deposit box this morning. We have bank records, signed agreements, everything. This was a bluff. They hadn't yet reached the bank, but Richard's reaction confirmed they were on the right track. The lawyer grabbed his briefcase. This meeting is over. We'll reconvene when cooler heads prevail. Sit down, Richard, said Margaret Chen, the board's most senior member. Her voice was quiet but carried unmistakable authority. I, for one, would like to hear the rest. Richard hesitated, trapped by the scrutiny of his peers. Slowly, he sank back into his chair. John continued, revealing the full extent of Emmett Wright's manipulation, not just of their family, but of others. The charitable donations that masked darker actions, the medical facility where children were quietly separated from parents deemed unsuitable by Emmett's standards. When he finished, the boardroom was silent. Margaret Chen was the first to speak. I knew your mother, John. Not well, but we met several times at charity functions. Her eyes were sad as she looked between the brothers. She was a kind woman who deserved better than what happened to her. She turned to the rest of the board. I move that we table the vote on John's position, effective immediately, and instead open an investigation into these allegations. Hands rose around the table, a clear majority supporting her motion. Richard sat motionless, defeat written across his features. The motion carries, Margaret declared. And Richard, I suggest you call your lawyer, not that it will help. She turned back to John. What happens now? John looked at Marcus, a silent communication passing between them. Now we finish what our mother started. We expose the truth, not just about our family, but about all the families Emmett Wright has destroyed. The gala tonight. Marcus added. Every major player in the city will be there, including Emmett himself. And the press, John finished. It's time for the world to know exactly who Emmett Wright really is. As they left the boardroom, dawn's light streamed through the windows, casting long shadows behind them. In the elevator, Marcus leaned against the wall, exhaustion and pain evident on his face. "We still have the safe deposit box to check," he reminded John. "And we will," John assured him. "But first, you need medical attention. Real medical attention." For once, Marcus didn't argue. The confrontation had drained what little energy he had left. "Do you think it will work?" he asked as they reached the lobby. "Exposing Emmett at the gala." "It has to," John replied, helping his brother. "Toward the car. For our mother. For all of them." As they stepped outside, the city was awakening around them. People hurrying to jobs, unaware of the secrets and lies being uncovered in their midst. John looked at his brother, the missing piece of himself he'd found through chance or fate, or a mother's undying love. "Whatever happens tonight," he said quietly, "we've already won. Family found us at last." Marcus nodded, the ghost of a smile touching his lips despite his pain. "Family found us at last."